And time to talk a little baseball with a woman who made history earlier this summer and who certainly is familiar with Central Virginia and the Lynchburg area. Melanie Newman joins us now on the Sportsline. Hi, Melanie. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, guys. How are you?
Doing great, Melanie. Melanie, a lot of folks around Central Virginia know you well from Liberty University, being a sideline reporter for the Flames games last year, and, of course, the Salem Red Sox being in the broadcast booth. Tell me, which is your favorite? What do you enjoy doing the most? I imagine it's baseball, since you've kind of really made your mark in baseball.
So if we're picking between the sports, as much as I love football, and the chance to do sidelines really takes me back to my roots and the fact that our family grew up in the heart of SEC country. But baseball, just for whatever reason, always piqued my intellectual side a little more than football. I love both sports dearly, and they mean a lot to me, especially the fact that I've had opportunities to be able to cover both for so long now. But yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, if you're having to absolutely choose between the two, baseball's been that love for me.
Melanie, obviously a lot of talk about the fact that you've made history being the first woman in the broadcast booth for the Baltimore Orioles, and I'm kind of curious. I mean, are you liking that attention, or do you just want to be a broadcaster and not worry about the the male female thing?
I mean, the thing about it is that I understand the impact that talking about it can make, especially on younger kids who are growing up and may not necessarily understand that we're coming into a time where you can really ditch gender roles when it comes to not only interests, but jobs and career paths that you want to pursue when you get older. So I do recognize the importance of it, and I greatly appreciate being a part of that impact. But on the same token, I didn't get hired by Baltimore just to fit a diversity agenda for them. I didn't get hired to be a PR stunt either. I simply got hired because they saw me as capable of contributing in a role that they needed filled. And I've really appreciated that about them. They've treated me as an equal with my other 18 male counterparts. And at the end of the day, that's what we're asking for. We're not asking for better treatment, and we're not asking for less treatment than the men. We just want it to really be the same. And on the flip side to that, too, I'm a rookie. Like, there's still so much more that I'm going to learn and improve upon now that I'm here. I mean, it's the same track while I was with the Salem Red Sox. Every day you find something that you want to change and be better at. And there's so many other people in this industry that I'm still looking up to in terms of continuing to improve my performance.
Any good rookie hazing stories you want to share with us?
I think with COVID-19, there's really nothing that you can talk about in terms of interactions with coworkers, but the entire family that I work with between the Orioles and Mathen have been absolutely just phenomenal.
Melanie, from single-A baseball now to the major leagues, that's a huge jump. Any player would be very envious of being able to make that kind of jump. But is baseball when it all comes down to it? I mean, you're doing the same thing you did in Salem, but just on a much, much bigger scale.
Well, and the thing about that is I was in Double-A for 4 years before I went technically down, if you would call it that, to the Advanced A League with Carolina and Salem. So I've been there. I've been in the minor league since 2014, and I think that was honestly some of the moments that meant the most to me after it was announced that I got the job was my former minor league players who I had worked alongside who reached out, and they knew more than anybody else will ever know exactly what I went through for so many years just to end up where I have today. So it means a lot to me, and the minor leagues will always have a very special place in my heart because of that. It's a much different atmosphere that really no other sport can offer you other than the minor leagues. Now, on the flip side, it's nice to be at the major league level and to have the resources that we do now that we didn't have in the minor leagues. You're not having to put out 8 fires in 5 different departments at the same time while you worry about your own job. There's, plenty of staff and support staff here who can do that. If you're looking for an obscure stat, or if you need a little backup on something you're trying to develop up here, there's people who will help you up here. But that being said, it is the major leagues, and it's the first time that I've juggled play-by-play, pre- and post-game hosting, as well as sideline reporting with one team on a day-to-day consistent basis, and being up at that level demands a higher performance and the ability to bring something different when fans are looking at, the 31st game of the season and they pretty much get the gist of it. You're challenged to find the new angle, to find what hasn't been discussed yet with the team. So it's still been a learning experience for me, and I think it was a big help once I had done a cycle of each of the 3 different assignments and understood better, having just experienced it for myself, what people are looking for and the feedback from producers and my coworkers as well. But it's fun, and it just means that you're always going to be on your toes because there's always going to be that challenge to stay one step ahead of everything.
O's play-by-play broadcaster Melanie Newman joining us here on the Sportsline. And Melanie, you talked about your affinity and your affection for baseball is probably your favorite sport. And, being a radio play-by-play person in baseball, a little bit different than every other sport. And I know you talked about at one point the fact that what you're able to do and the stories you're able to tell between pitches is really what kind of separates you as a baseball play-by-play person. Talk a little bit about that and, the challenge of trying to fill some time and keep people interested when there is so much time between pitches.
Yeah, and I think that was really the benefit of the fact that I had first and foremost come up as a sideline reporter and had those opportunities a good 4 or 5 years before I ended up in the booth. So that had been the angle that I had pursued and honed for so long, was being able to really humanize the athletes that are in front of people. What are their superstitions? What's going on with, their family lives that they're willing to share? Because I think we're finally in a movement in professional sports where we're taking back this pedestal that they have set athletes on for so long, and we're realizing that they have problems just like the rest of us because they're still human beings. They just have a little bit different of a job than most other people do. So with that, it just kind of became a reaction of getting my feet wet in the booth and seeing how things ran, the pacing of speaking, and really what you're trying to do between the pitches, that I realized I had that ability to still tell those stories. Just because I was in the booth and not on the sidelines didn't mean that those stories had to go away. It was just now the opportunity to craft when and how to tell those stories in between the pitches.
Melanie, when did you get bitten by the baseball bug? When did you feel like this might be a job that you would have for your life?
Oh, gosh. That is a very different answer between those two questions. I fell in love with baseball probably when I was in middle school. Growing up outside of Atlanta, we had several year-round facilities that hosted some of the best talent in the nation. So everybody around us played baseball, and they played baseball pretty much 365 days a year. And, of course, you had the mid-'90s Braves who did nothing but win at that point, so it just fed into that culture even further. And I didn't have the athletic gene, but I had the want to learn about the game and to be around it and to contribute in any way that I could. So I pursued it from that point forward. And when I looked at graduating from college, it was just one of those things of, I tell all the kids that I mentor now that they need to give a serious consideration to television news stations, because I didn't know at the time that being employed with a station was still a viable path to working in a sport as a live reporter or as a correspondent. So I did the only thing that I could figure out at that point, which was to pursue working directly with teams. I went from an independent team in Texas straight to the Mobile Bay Bears, who at the time were a AA affiliate of the Arizona Diamondbacks, and of course they just had their last season. But you get thrown in pretty quickly, and you discover exactly what it takes to have a baseball game to put on in the first place, and what goes in with the players. And I got to the point where I kind of ended up in a little bit of a tough spot, just listening to people who would say, "Oh, you're great, and you'll be in the big leagues by this year. You'll do this," and you just can't do that in any regard to your life, of getting so far ahead that you get hooked on this deadline that's ahead of you instead of where you're at the moment. So over the last couple years, honestly, I finally slowed down. I had some really good friends and mentors around me who helped me to see the bigger picture and to see where I was at the moment, that when 2019 was ending, I knew I had a recurring job with Salem, and I was very much looking forward to returning back with the Red Sox in 2020. I thought that was where I would be, and I was happy with it. I fell in love with the minor leagues, and it was a place where I had really kind of found a rhythm and found a way to make a difference and connect with the community around us. So it was a surprise when Baltimore called, but you don't turn down that call once it finally does come in.
Melanie, what do you miss most about Lynchburg or Central Virginia? Anything?
Oh, gosh, there's so much. I've worked with Liberty, first of all, in small capacities since 2014. And I still remember my first drive up there. And I hadn't really been to the area before, but I knew Liberty just had such an amazing presence when it came to developing broadcasters and how well their athletic facilities were run and all of that. And I just felt drawn to it. I still remember seeing just how vastly green the area was, and it took my breath away. And then I started meeting the people who work there and how unbelievable they are, and they want to get to know you. And it's the same for the community as well. They're the most inviting fans to be around. And it just got even better finding out that I would get to contribute full time to the football program last year in their broadcasts, and meeting Coach Freeze and how inviting he and his whole family and staff were. It's changed my life, and it's always going to be a spot that I go back to. I have really close friends who live there now, and it holds a special place in my heart, and it always will.
Melanie, who was your favorite baseball broadcaster growing up? Maybe someone that you really looked up to?
Well, so that's kind of the crazy thing about it all is the 94 strike kind of took it out of our dad as far as being a fan and paying attention to the sport. So my engagement in the sport came entirely on my own and was mostly at the amateur high school level until I got old enough in high school. And, you have friends who can drive, and you'd all pile up and go to Braves games together. So I had more of an influence from the football side of things. Our dad listened to Jim Fife growing up, and he called for Auburn radio and did all of their football games. And then, of course, we'd see guys like Bob Rathbun and Tim Brando who had the national events, and that's what stuck out to me. Once I kind of refined my path and realized that baseball was where I wanted to be, of course, I tapped in a little more. And you know the legend of people like Vin Scully, but it's different when you actually sit down and stop and study their work and study exactly how they present a game and what pieces stand out to you that you identify with, because you don't want to mimic yourself after somebody, but I certainly think when you find little bits and pieces that you identify that speaks to your personality about how to present a game, you can culminate all of those together and still bring an original identity to the table. So Scully always stood out to me. And then, of course, you look at just people around the country. Boog Shambi, who has become such a great friend of mine and somebody I really look up to. And, of course, now Susan Waldman, who's with the Yankees. She's been absolutely unbelievable. Eric Nadel with the Texas Rangers. I mean, it's a massive family of people who have done unbelievable work.
And the Orioles are playing good baseball this year. You caught them at a good time, Melanie.
Yeah, it's been a nice little bonus to see. I mean, we're still very realistic about the fact that they're in a rebuilding period right now. And we talked about it the other day and said, look, it's kind of like when you go in to flip a house that's been foreclosed on and you find some bonuses, some good materials that are still there that you didn't plan on having. So the eyes are still moving ahead, and I think that helps to not take the losses as hard when you still understand where this team is as a whole. But it does make the wins a lot sweeter, and you can see those raw pieces coming together for the Orioles. They're going to have some fun years coming up.
And it looks like there is still a game on tap for this afternoon, or coming up in just a little bit, right? I mean, with everything that's going on, and I'm kind of curious your thoughts, not necessarily on the politics of what's going on, but the fact that politics is infiltrating sports to such a large degree, when I think for a lot of us, sports has always been the escape to get away from the realities of real life. And, now we're seeing those two things kind of intertwine much more, which obviously changes the whole dynamic of sports.
Yeah, so far 4 games have been declared as postponed for this afternoon. The Orioles and Rays game is not one of them. The players were seen on the field earlier today going through their warm-ups and their routines, but we're very fortunate that Brandon Hyde is a player's manager, and he's held open and active conversations with this entire team as often as he can about every single thing that's come their way. And that's from social injustice issues to COVID-19, and even the hurricanes and the wildfires, because those do affect some of these players' families. So I feel really fortunate that we have a front office and a staff that want to listen and want to engage in conversation and create productive change in our society. Look, they stand by every player and every team that chooses not to play right now, and I don't think it's been fair. And this goes back to what I said earlier about the fact that we're in a point right now where we are finally humanizing athletes, and we are realizing that they are not machines that are sent out there every day and perform without emotion, without reaction, without living a life outside of the bubble that they are quite literally in right now. But they see and they feel just the same way we do, and they have a voice, and social media has absolutely contributed to that. And I think it's just a matter of everybody needing to listen to everybody right now.
Melanie, in addition to baseball and football, you've covered a little bit of everything. You've done axe throwing, cornhole, swimming, tennis. That versatility has really paid off for you, don't you think?
You know what? It has, in terms of, for one, absolutely keeping my bills paid. But it's been fun. Volleyball was actually the first assignment that I ever had while I was in college, and was something I actually returned to with Liberty last year. They had me balancing sideline reporting for football and then also doing play-by-play for the volleyball program, which, of course, had a fantastic run. But seeing all those different sports and those different athletes, it just gives you a different perspective on how people approach their own individual sport. And especially the different ones that people don't think about, like axe throwing and cornhole. They're just so excited to get to talk to people and to get to share their stories as well. And I think that's the best part.
Melanie, what's the one event, and I'll use that term rather than sporting event, but I'll just use the term event, where you sat there and you thought to yourself, I can't believe this is on TV?
The first time that I got a call to cover axe throwing, first of all, I was kind of terrified, because I was like, I don't know how this operates. Like, what am I supposed to talk about? And thank God, again, with social media, there's YouTube channels now that are dedicated to it and all these other things. So they're finding ways to put this stuff out there. But yeah, that one took the cake. And then once I got the opportunity for the other smaller sports as well, it was kind of like, all right, let's dive in and see what this one has to offer.
Once you've done axe throwing, you can do anything, right?
That's what it feels like. Yeah.
Hey, listen, we really appreciate you taking a couple minutes for us. Thank you so much. Enjoy the game tonight, and hopefully we can stay in touch and catch up again down the road.
It's always good to call back to one of my homes, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie.
Appreciate it.